I'm very glad to welcome Natasha Rattu, Executive Director at Karma Nirvana, an organisation based here in Leeds, a leading charity working towards its strategic vision of ending honour-based abuse in the UK. Natasha has developed the National Specialist Honour-Based Abuse Police Risk Assessment Tool and has trained 26 police forces across England and Wales. Natasha is also known for being featured in the Channel 4 documentary The Push in her support of Fawziyah Javed and Fawziyah Javed's family. Welcome to Fever Radio, Natasha.
Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. I guess, Natasha, perhaps you can just first of all begin by explaining to us the kind of work that you do at Karma Nirvana.
Yeah, so Karma Nirvana are a national charity. We deliver a national helpline that supports people affected by honour-based abuse. Our helpline is commissioned by the Home Office, and we share data around the number of cases that we're seeing. On average, we deal with around 10,000 contacts every year just within the UK. And the support that we offer to people will depend on what their needs are. So we have people who ring and just want to know what their options are, what can they do if they want to leave a situation, right through to they're ready to leave and helping people to leave. So there's a variety of things that we do by the helpline. But we also do lots of work in terms of campaigning. So we had a recent campaign to raise the age of marriage from 16, 17 with parents' consent to 18. So we do lots of work in that space, do lots of training. But ultimately, our agenda is to really make sure that people affected by these issues are best supported and are able to be safe.
Okay. Now, many people who may have seen the Channel 4 documentary, The Push, they may have, there may be a question as to where is it honour-based abuse or is this just simply domestic violence? How can we differentiate between the two? I mean, how does honour-based abuse differ from other forms of domestic violence?
I mean, honour-based abuse is a form of domestic abuse because domestic abuse, by legal definition, is abuse that's perpetrated between two people who are personally connected. So you have a victim that's being abused by a partner. It could be parents, in-laws, extended family members. That would still be classified as domestic abuse. So in Fawziyah's experience in particular, she experienced domestic abuse from her husband. The documentary shows that quite evidently, but the honour dynamic to it was the complicity of the perpetrator's family. So within Fawziyah's experience, she was told things like, in our family, we don't divorce, thinking about reputation, thinking about shame. And that honour dynamic would have made it much more difficult for Fawziyah to have left that situation because of that complicity. We also see in the documentary how after Kashif Anwar has pushed his wife off a cliff, he doesn't dial 999. The first thing that he does is ring his father. At no point after he murdered her, after he pushed her, did he dial 999. So again, it's that familial complicity that we see quite uniquely in cases of honour-based abuse that you don't see in other forms of domestic abuse.
Yeah, I mean, you do see that moment in the documentary where Fawziyah's husband demands that she return back to the home, even though she's saying repeatedly, "I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back today." And he gets very aggressive and also says something on the lines of, "You're not going to be that British woman.
Exactly.
You're gonna live in you're gonna be the way that we expect you to be." And
exactly.
And she does go back in that case, doesn't she? She goes back there. So I mean, to some degree, do you feel that Fawziyah felt that pressure that she needed to conform to certain ways of living or certain ideas?
I think to an extent, that these expectations were being placed on Fawziyah in terms of how they wanted her to dress and behave. But at the same time, Fawziyah had a very loving and supportive family in her own family.
That was clear.
They're very incredible. And I think what this shows for people who assume that, South Asian families are all the same, they're absolutely not. For the perpetrator's family, they had these beliefs, values, and ideals and these expectations of Fawziyah, which were not supported by her family. The reason Fawziyah went back was because he had stolen money from her and she had a strong sense of injustice and she wanted to get that money back. Never did she ever think that he would go to the extents and the lengths of doing what he did. She felt like she was in control. She felt like she had a plan to leave. She was going to leave him. Never would she have imagined, neither would her family have ever imagined, that he would have been capable of doing the horrific thing that he did to her in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the common cultural or societal factors that could have contributed to honour-based abuse in this case, or in a more broader perspective?
So, as I alluded to, the familial complicity of the perpetrator's mother and father within all of this, every time that Yasmin, Fawziyah's mother, and Fawziyah went to address the behavior of the perpetrator, they would gaslight, and make Yasmin feel like it's her daughter, she's not being a good enough wife.
Mm.
They would never acknowledge and accept that their son was being abusive. And there's no doubt that they would have heard some of the physical assaults that we hear in the documentary, The Push. Fawziyah talks about an incident where he had put a pillow over her face and he was
Yeah.
punching the pillow. And, they lived within that household. It's not a mansion, it's a very small, semi-detached house. There's no way that they were not aware of that abuse that was going on. So that's again that element of complicity, that element of making Fawziyah feel, because there were times where she questioned herself, is it me, because that's how they made her feel.
Mm.
So it's that element of it. And I think had Fawziyah not have had a supportive mother and father, because we do see circumstances of girls in Fawziyah's position that aren't supported by their own parents, where they are pushed
Mm.
back to, make it work. We weren't seeing that here, but on the helpline, we do see examples of that. So it's that element of complicity, and it's how shame is used, it's how honor and reputation is used. The father-in-law was so concerned about the reputation of their family if there was a divorce. But look at what happened. I mean, where is his reputation now?
Mm.
His son's in prison. So I think it's that element in the main in this particular case where that dynamic of honor played such a big role and made it more difficult for Fawziyah in some respects, because she was made to feel like she was in the wrong, and they were ultimately right.
I mean, the father-in-law at some point during the documentary says that, she's our daughter, not theirs.
Mm.
Very, very strong
Mm.
and chilling moment, I might say, as well.
Mm.
He's saying that, this is our daughter now. This is my son now as well. His son that already exists. But it doesn't seem that he cared so much for his daughter. And so, I mean, at the crux of this, is it that males are seen as more valuable in some cultures, and that males keep, in South Asian communities, maybe males keep the honor of the family and that women keep the shame? Is that?
I think there's an element of that. I think there is definitely an element of that. I think the best way it's been described to me is men are, if you view a man as a bar of gold and you put gold in the mud, and a woman as a piece of silk and you put that in the mud, you take the gold out. It's a lot easier if that man has done something dishonorable to wipe it clean, to
Mm.
restore and regain his honor. Whereas for the woman, if she did something that was perceived as dishonorable, no
Mm.
matter how much you wash the silk, there's always that taint. People always remember what it was that she did, be it the divorce, be it the, you know, expectations that she didn't meet for her family or his family. People always remember that. So it's a lot more difficult for that woman to kind of regain her honor. And this is why you do see that disparity in how men and boys are treated versus how women and girls are treated. You tend to see a greater degree of control over women and girls, because there are, if they do bring shame, people are going to remember that. And what will that mean in terms of her ability to get married, or how people will perceive her in terms of her worth in the community? We definitely see a lot of that on the helpline.
It seems like that's something that we really need to kind of challenge or get over, if it's just kind of sitting there in the background, it seems. And I wonder how we do that. I wonder if you have any suggestions.
There are so many ways to address it. I feel like in this sector of work that I work in, it's always women that are leading on this. We need the men
Mm.
within the community to be leading on this. We need men to challenge those attitudes and those beliefs of other men where they see this happening,
Mm.
because, the women don't have that ability to do that in that way. They're not, they're not as valued to kind of share those views. But if we see men from within the community actively challenging that, that's going to be far greater at making that difference, that generational difference that we need to see. Sadly, we're seeing these generational beliefs and attitudes being handed down to younger generations, and that needs to stop. We need to kind of break that curse that gets handed down from generation to
Mm.
generation. Now, I'm a mum of two boys, and I'm really mindful that that they're very privileged. They live in a very privileged world, which is very advantageous for them. And it's important for me as a mother, but also my husband as a father to make sure that they don't take on these ideas and values that sadly are handed down to younger boys and to younger girls too, in terms of, and this is how girls, this gendered nature to this is what girls can do and this is what boys can do, and that variance. So I think we all have a role to play, but particularly men could have a real strong voice to kind of changing this for future generations. I think that's really critical.
So we're saying it really befalls South Asian men to take a little bit more of a lead on this to
Absolutely.
overcome it. That's the only way we're going to get out of this problem, and I can see that as well. All right, so what are some of the warning signs or red flags that somebody out there might be experiencing honour-based abuse? How can we look into the community and be more vigilant about these kind of things?
So I think it's where you see somebody is being extremely controlled. We have legislation around coercive control. So this person is controlled to the extent of who they can marry, what they can wear, what they can study. There's that extent of extreme control over decisions where they're limited and they're living within that oppression. And there are these expectations that they're required to uphold. I think that's a real classic sign, that sign of somebody being controlled. And then if that person doesn't conform, doesn't meet the expectations, you then see potential risks of them being harmed to get them to be controlled. So they're the sort of things that you can see. And in terms of what the community can do, it's about challenging it, but also holding a safe space. So it just kind of going back to the documentary of The Push, you hear Fawziyah's mum will talk about how he wishes, he had these concerns about the perpetrator. And he said, don't come back to your mum and dad over every little thing, make it work. He wishes on reflection, and hindsight is a wonderful thing. But, had he have just made himself available to be that safe space, maybe she would have shared. And this is the role that we have within our family, be that safe space, so that somebody who might be going through this, and you might not recognize the signs because people going through it don't want the world to know. They are very good at keeping it away and hiding abuse that's going on. But if you can be that point of a safe space for somebody, then you're definitely making a difference within not just your family, but within your community too.
Yeah, there was a big point of regret for Fawziyah's mum, wasn't it, in the documentary? And actually, my next question was going to be, what challenges do victims of honour-based abuse face when seeking help or trying to escape the abusive situation? And one thing you've said there is that there needs to be a safe space for them to be able to go to explain what's going on with them. Are there any other specific challenges that we can point to?
Yeah, I think when you live within a community where it's very much normalized that you're to behave in these particular ways or you're to do these particular things, it makes it very difficult for you to speak up and get help or recognize that what you're going through is abuse. So I think it's about challenging that. That's really important. And we obviously get victims who have other additional barriers. We support people who come here and don't have legal status in the UK, and they can face additional challenges around being able to access a refuge or a shelter, for example. But, we have provisions in place for people in those circumstances. So really, there shouldn't be any reason why somebody going through this can't get help. It's just important that people know who to reach out to. And that's where our helpline can be a real lifeline, because they can ring our helpline and they don't have to tell us any information about their name, anything that might identify them. Just have the courage to ring and just share a little bit about what you're going through and know what options are available, know what your choices are, because we have a non-judgmental, confidential line where people can do that, anytime that they need to.
Just in the build-up to this interview, I was reading about a story of Amberine, another lady that and family that you've been involved with at Karma Nirvana. Just as we're talking through this interview, I do worry about girls who've been married from South Asia who come over to the UK and are potentially in a more complex predicament where they're away from their families. They potentially don't have access to money. All of their contacts are the family that they're coming into. I mean, these are situations that we should, as a community, be conscious of, that there is the possibility for abuse. And, if a girl in that situation doesn't seem to have independence, can't leave the house by herself, doesn't have access to spend money by herself, then there is a clear possibility of abuse there.
Yes, it's a big red flag. It's a massive red flag because I think the additional challenges that people who arrive to this country without speaking the language, they
Mm,
don't have recourse to public funding because of their legal status, and they're totally reliant upon the person who has sponsored them over to be in this country. It's massively difficult for those people in those situations because the people around them have so much control over their life.
mm,
And sometimes we also recognize that people are very fearful of contacting police because, in terms of the police that operate in the country where they've come from, they don't know what the police in this country will be like and how they might deal with it. So they have all of those additional barriers, but there are ways to get help. There is domestic violence concession rules in place for people that are going through this where we can get them into refuge. We help a lot of people in these situations to be safe. So it's really important that the key message going out there is if you are in that situation, there is help available. Do reach out and find out what your options are.
okay. So, what legal protections are in place for victims of honour-based abuse? Are they effective?
So, in terms of legal protections, really like domestic abuse, there isn't crime for honor-based abuse, but there are, honor-based abuse is like an umbrella term, and there are all these things that happen within it. So, murder, as we have seen,
Mm,
is a offence. You've got forced marriage, which is also a crime, assaults, threats to kill. All these things are criminal, activities that can take place underneath this umbrella of honor-based abuse. But one of the things that Karma Nirvana are really driving for is to have a legal definition of what honor-based abuse is,
mm,
because despite us being an organization that have been around for 31 years, we still don't have one single universal definition. And this is really problematic in that everybody has a different understanding of what it is. Some people call it honor-based violence, some people call it so-called honor-based abuse. Some people just assume that because somebody is from a South Asian community, it's got to be honor-based violence. And that's also not true.
mm.
So we need to have one single legal, clear understanding from government. In fact, I had a meeting with government yesterday to talk about it because I think there is appetite there. And we're just kind of pushing them to do that because what it will mean is we'll have legal words to describe what a lot of people go through that we don't currently have in place. So there's going to be that legal recognition of this experience,
Mm.
which will then facilitate better data, better protections in place for people because we have this kind of cross-governmental understanding legally of what this issue is. So we're really pushing for that. And I think we're getting closer to it and are having those conversations with government as we speak.
Okay, so we don't have a definition for honour-based abuse today. I mean,
Not a legal one.
why is that a complicated thing to come to? I mean, it seems for the regular Joe out there, including me, it doesn't seem like something so complicated. So why is that so complicated or difficult to come to?
I think, the government are probably going to be the best place to answer that.
Right.
We've pushed on them to do this. The Women and Equality Committee made a recommendation last July for government to do this. You're absolutely right. It's a very simple thing that they can do. But I think what it goes to show is how deprioritized this issue is on the government's agenda. It's kind of one of those add-ons to their policy on violence against women and girls. It's not taken as seriously. That's genuinely why I feel like it's been deprioritized. But I think having exposure through the documentary, The Push, and sadly, we've had quite a few honor killings that have taken place recently. Nationally, it's a statistic that we have 12 honor killings that happen in the UK every year.
Well,
So I think we're hearing more about it. It's helping to drive it up the priority. We just need the government to take it seriously. But I do feel like we are getting closer to that.
okay. How can education and awareness initiatives help prevent honour-based abuse?
Massive. I mean, education's critical. I think, these ideas we were talking about how honor-based abuse is being handed down, these ideologies, these beliefs and values are being handed down to younger generations.
Hmm.
So education plays a critical role to challenging some of those ideas from an earlier point so that they don't manifest into future problems of adults that have these very ingrained beliefs and values. So education plays a critical role in challenging, but also spotting signs. We get a lot of referrals from schools where they have concerns about pupils. So it's about also being that pair of eyes for potential victims within your schools. And there's definitely a lot more that education can be doing to be getting that message out there. And we're always kind of working tirelessly to make that happen.
I mean, I saw the interview with yourself and Yasmin, Fawziyah's mother, on, I think it was Good Morning Britain, where the interviewer is also a South Asian gentleman. And he mentions to Yasmin that he's from the same community and he's very aware of these kind of situations, or we're all aware of some kind of situation like this amongst the people that we know, the communities that we're involved in. I mean, that's such a horrible thing to be able to admit, really, isn't it? And I think if a lot of South Asian people will be able to reflect on that and say, yeah, you're right, we do know somebody, or we are familiar with this kind of a situation.
Absolutely. I mean, 1 in 4 women experience domestic abuse. One
Right.
in 4 women in their lifetime. 2 women die every week at the hands of domestic abuse. And the sad reality is, at some point in your journey today, if you've gone to work, you've gone to school, whatever you've done with your day, you will have come into contact with somebody affected by domestic abuse, but you just might not know it. That's the reality. So he's absolutely right to say we will all know somebody within our community, but how actively are we looking out for it? How actively are we challenging it? And honestly, are we really a safe space? Would somebody feel comfortable to come to you and share this? Do you make yourself available and known that you are anti-domestic abuse? You are anti these practices that harm women every day? And if you're not doing that, then we're doing a disservice to women and girls within our community, because that's who it predominantly impacts and affects.
Yeah, I think you're right. We do need to fess up that there are people, women, who are suffering, in large numbers due to these kind of reasons, and it needs to stop. And we need to be honest about what's going on. We need to face it, and we need to provide safe spaces for people to be able to be honest about what their experience is. Natasha, thank you so much for coming to talk to us and give us this really important interview. What resources are available for individuals who are experiencing or suspect they are experiencing honour-based abuse?
There are so many resources. So our helpline is one critical resource if somebody wanted to just know what their options are or to get support and help. There's lots of resources available online. We've got lots on our website about what this is if people want to read a bit more about it. That would be kind of, I think, the first point. And then I think depending on what that person wanted to do, there are more resources on top of that in terms of safe accommodation. If people wanted police assistance to pursue something, that's not the given. That's not something you have to do, but that is a resource that's available. Women's Aid have also opened a couple of funds recently to help people in their flee, but also in terms of when they have fled, in terms of their safety as well. So we're helping people to access therapy, to access goods for their property when they've left, when they leave with nothing, for example. So there is just such a wealth of different things out there that are available. The first thing that someone can do is just ring the helpline and find out what, can be done for them.
Yeah, I think Leeds Women's Aid are a fantastic organisation.
Yes, so we work in partnership with them. So we have an advocacy worker where we've partnered up with Leeds Women's Aid. So we have a person that does work specifically around Leeds on this issue.
Great. And I know actually just next door to us over here, we have Shantona Family and Women's Centre, who do some great work in the field as well. And your own website, can I give that to our listeners?
Yes, so it's www.karmanirvana.org.uk.
Natasha Rattu, thank you so much for this really, really important interview. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'll give you the final word, actually, if there's a final message you'd like to give to our listeners out there.
I think it'd be really important for people to know that they're not alone. I think perpetrators are very good at isolating people and making them feel that this is about you, you're the problem. That's what perpetrators do, and you're not alone. There are so many people that we support every day going through this. So please do reach out and get help.
Thank you, Natasha.